This
school,
conference will
and
now be recorded.
then they named the school after her when she passed, Susie White Dasher. Claude Harvard was very fascinated, like many people during that time, adults and children, about wireless communication, something that we take for granted, the radio, but that was the new technology today. And he was very fascinated by it, and he wanted not only to hear the radio, but he wanted to know how it worked. That's the kind of mind he has. He was tinkering, trying to find out how it worked. And so he seen an ad in a magazine that if you sold a product by the name of cloverlein solve, white cloverlein solve, which was supposed to heal everything, it was only 25 cents and it can heal anything. I want some of that. Matter of fact, give me some of that. And so if you sold a certain amount of those solve cans, you would get a free radio. Hey, and so he definitely took that up, and he started knocking on doors, and white people, black people, young, old, whoever was over there, he would knock on their doors and tell them some solve. In a short period of time, he was able to, uh, you know, accomplish his goal. And he received a radio kit, a crystal radio set. And when you're going back doing in radio technology, that's one of the earlier sets. They use a crystal uh, to pick up the signal. It was a wireless signal, and okay, he had basically a crystal radio set. It's not coming up for some reason, but uh, it was basically a set where uh, you can use the crystal to pick up a signal, but the bandwidth was very small. And the problem was also that he didn't have the, the speakers. So for him to get the speakers, he had to sell some more cloverlein salt, and he was able to do that. Uh, and even though he had the headset, he still wasn't able to pick up the signal because he didn't realize that the radio station that was in Atlanta was just too far away from where he was at, and he was unable to pick up that signal at that point. Okay, but he was engaged, and that set him off his mind in that new technology. Uh, this was something a case. The Red Summer of 1919. Uh, there was a very uh, trying times for African Americans, and it was a period during white supremacists terrorized and riot took place in over 3 dozen cities across America, and this happened in 1919. The American Times recorded mentioned how this African American, he was basically a sharecropper who had worked for his employer for over 10 years. He accused him of assaulting his daughter. And when the NAACP came along, it was two men. It was Dr. H.T. Jones, he was a doctor in Dublin, and the Reverend George Washington Williams, he was the branch secretary there. And he found out that the his employer didn't want him to leave because he had owed him some money, and so he had the sheriff lock him up. And but the news was out that he had assaulted, and that was basically a lie. And unfortunately for James West, he died tragically. And this is an article, and maybe that's probably one of the reasons why his mother, who left Detroit prior to this and went to visit her brother on the Bell Street, not too far from the Henry Ford Company. Uh, she went to Detroit and she decided to make a better life for her son. This is a cemetery that was down in Dublin, and it was called Across the Creek. This is where African Americans was buried, and so they didn't even want African Americans to be buried in their own cemetery, and so you would have to be buried here, across the creek. Interesting name. So in 1922, Claude came to Detroit, and he was 11 years old. Okay, I'm gonna stop right here. And this is the Michigan Central Station. If anybody wants to weigh in for a moment on Detroit in 1922, so let's go back. We're not talking about now. I'll give you an opportunity to share a couple of things if you feel like you want to. Please don't hold the mic. Respect everybody that want to ask a question. So I'll let Mary engage in that process. You want to take over for that, Mary?
Well,
Hello?
would anybody like to share their thoughts about
If anybody, before I go on,
maybe about what it was like to first arrive in Detroit?
what
As
was what was basically
tragedy.
what basically was Detroit like back in 1922? So if anybody can share that, uh, I don't think too many people was born in 1922 here, but I'm not the only one that's a historian. Uh, you got people that lived, they had family here, so maybe they can share some insight if they care to. Otherwise, I'll continue. Okay, I'll continue. This is uh, this is Michigan Central Railroad. It was very vibrant at that time. Rich railroads from different states crisscross, and that was a major location in the city of Detroit. Oh, here's the crystal radio set. Isn't that interesting? This is how the crystal radio set, stepping back for a minute, circling back. This is, you see the detector point. That's where the crystal would be at. The headphones that he didn't receive originally, that was to the right. The antenna, you create a wire and you make a antenna, and then the ground circuit so we can pick up signal as well. Okay. Orleans and Trumbull. That is where his mother, Adela, her name was, she was staying with her relatives in that section, 1503, and that's in Poletown, which is a stone throw from Hamtramck at that time. Even though there was a lot of African Americans living in Black Bottom that was further east, this is where she found the place. It was basically a full-story buildings. This is how they look, 4 stories up, and like boys will be boys, Claude found a way to get up there on the roof and set up his radio uh, antenna is set, and lo and behold, he got a signal from this radio station, WCX. Uh, and I know he was in seventh heaven when he got that signal, and people started to hear that he had a radio, and they wanted to come up and hear the radio. This was the time when families, like we have TVs in the evening, we have our special programs. People would gather around families and listen to their favorite radio programs, and that would really be a entertaining moment during the day. So a lot of people didn't have radios, so they would knock on Claude's door. We heard you had a radio. Can we come up? He said, "Yep." So that shows you how friendly he was. He didn't keep his radio to himself, and he was able to improve the radio set as well by getting a vacuum tube, an A and B battery with a larger antenna and a microphone to increase the sound. And I know everybody enjoyed that when the sounds came in more clearly and less static. This is Park Elementary School. This is the school he went to first when he came in Detroit. It's on the east side. Uh, this is another school, Sherrod Middle School, and he went there. And while he was there, his shop teacher suggested that he go check out the Henry Ford Trade Schools. They had an excellent program, and he recognized Claude's ability, and he thought that school would be better than this school because that school, Henry Ford Trade School, basically focused on vocational education from top to bottom, and so it really wasn't that far away. This is Henry Ford. I'm going to stop here for a moment. Once again, the man who started it all, Henry Ford. There's a lot of people have their own feelings about Henry Ford. This is his first car, the quadricycle. That was back in 1896. And I have my own views about him, Henry Ford, but he definitely was a mover and a shaker, and he had a lot of bold vision. And he was not an educated man. He's self-educated, like a lot of people during that time. Andrew Carnegie uh, was the Rockefeller. If you go through back in history during that time, Thomas Edison, he never received education. He was self-educated, you know. And there's nothing wrong with education. Let me say that. But these men, through grit and determination and extra effort, they accomplished their goal. But they didn't do it alone. Let's be clear here. They had help all along the way. But they recognized help and was able to connect up with people that could assist them to enhance their product. Do anybody want to say anything about Henry Ford before I go on? Okay, let's continue. Henry Ford. What made Henry Ford so popular was the moving assembly line. There was other great manufacturers, car manufacturers, particularly in the city of Detroit. There were many. But what made him stand head and shoulders above everybody was the moving assembly line, and that made mass production of cars more profitable. Okay, this is one model, the Model T. This was an earlier model, another model, 1903, 1908, and how he continues to improve on the product. And that should be something that we should recognize, is that sometimes you have an idea, it's not going to happen right away. It go over a period of years and years and years and staying on top of it. You see your dream become a reality. It takes time and determination and effort. Henry Ford, and looking very successful. He was a racing car driver, and his claim to fame initially was he won a race against a very famous racing car driver with a vehicle that he created. And when he did that, he got the attention of a lot of people that had money, capitalists, and they started investing in Henry Ford's idea. They said, "This guy, I want to get in on him, what he's got for the future." And they made a lot of money at that time too. Yes, he made it possible for the average citizen to drive an automobile. And initially, the people in his circle, they basically wanted him to keep cars very high, but he wanted to keep it more affordable, and he had a lot of pushback. He also had pushback with the $5 a day. That was something that you weren't supposed to do if you're part of the good old boy network. You go along with everybody else, but he was a maverick, and he did things the way he wanted to, and he had a lot of backbone. And so he offered $5 a day, and this was basically people came from all over the country to get in on this. And you had Southerners, white and black, that came in with their attitudes and uh, their perceptions of African Americans from Kentucky and Tennessee and different parts. And then you had people from out of the country came in. And of course, you had African Americans getting away from the hard atrocities of things that happened to James Waters. And they came. This is Woodward Avenue and Henry Ford. Some of the buildings are still up today on Woodward Avenue. If you go by there, you still see those old factories where they made the automobiles. And I mean, there's a lot of folks out there coming just for that plant. Uh, Brother Jamon Jordan, who's a local historian, he said the first paved road went from 6 mile to 7 mile because of Henry Ford. Started bringing in cars and parts. And in 1914, that's when they started, the assembly line basically began. People was coming in by the thousands. It looked a little bit like New York to me, but it's right here in Detroit. And people will go where the money's at to make a better life for themselves and their family. This is the moving assembly line, specialty stations, and people would ride. The car would go down and they would put parts, and then it would go to the next part. It was very demanding for the workers. You had to keep up. And sometimes when you're moving fast, you could get hurt, and that wasn't too pleasant. Here's another part of the assembly line. It was very uh, going work, doing it over and over. A lot of people didn't want to do that, and they started quitting. And that's why he made it $5 a day too, because people was quitting because they didn't want to do the same thing over and over and over again. It gets to be a little monotonous. But if you're making $5 a day, you put up with it. And if you don't, then somebody else will get your spot. And that's how that goes. Big business, production. Each time the car is getting more and more parts, you see, and it's getting ready to roll on out into public. See, those is come on down, and once it hit the streets, it's for sale. You can't even buy you one if you can afford one. And some of the workers was able to afford one. In 1916, uh, this is where Henry Ford gave back. Some people, one of the things I admire about him is that when he made money, he gave back. And this was the school called the Henry Ford Trade School. It was a vocational school for young boys that didn't have a father. And they would give them opportunity for a better life, vocational life, learning different trades, metallurgy, drafting, engine design, and it was a very good school. And so this is what it looked like. The building is no longer there, but it was right along Woodward Avenue. Claude played hooky from school one day, and he walked from his house, which was about 5 miles from Trumbull to Henry Ford Trade School, a little under 5 miles. And when he got there, he was very nervous when he went through the front gate, and the 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 guard didn't have any problem. He was able to go through with no problem at all. But when he got to the building, the trade school, there was an attendant, and he wanted to know why. Uh, why do you want to come to the school? What's the reason? And Claude said he wanted an application to get into school, and so he said you need your parent or guardian to get into school. You can't get an application without one. And Claude said, well, my shop teacher told me that I could. And so they went back and forth. Claude was very respectable, but he was very tenacious at times to get to his goal. And he was going, arguing, and then the principal, he overheard it. Mr. Frederick E. Surley, he was at the school for over 30 years. And he came over to Claude and he took him upstairs. And he told Claude that we don't have too many, we don't have a problem with having color in the school, but we don't allow fighting. We are very strong uh, rules and regulations about fighting. And so if you get caught fighting, you can get kicked out. You'll get kicked out immediately. And so he told Claude once they got his transcripts and he passed an entry level test, he just to see where I guess his score was at. He was able to get into school, and they gave him a badge. The badge would identify him when he came through the door to the school attendant. Wouldn't have a problem with that person anymore. And not only did he do well, he excelled at his grades. His first day in school, though, he putting his first put his best foot forward. One of the students, like students, boys will be boys, and he they served hot lunches, so he had some his hot food, and he wanted to put some salt on it, and so when he was getting ready to put the salt on it, all the salt came out, and so somebody had loosened it up, and the boy next to him said, across from him, and said, "He's the one that did it. The one that's sitting next to you. Hit him in the face. He's the one that did it." And Claude said, "No, you hit him in the face. I'm gonna get up and get me another plate of food." But the cook said, "If you're stupid enough to allow that to happen, then I'm not going to give you another plate of food." So he went without food that day. But he taught him a lesson, and he said from that point on, whenever we went, he would always check the food, salt shaker, I guess the pepper shaker too, whatever he had, make sure it was on tight. Yeah, but he excelled in his classes, and he got A's, and he was very good mathematically and mechanically, a very astute student. After school, they had a program of radio. These are some of the students, and as you can see, he's the only person of color, and I'm quite sure some of those fellas wasn't that nice, and I'm quite sure some of them were nice. So, but he was the only person of color, and over time, he proved his mettle and also his intellect. 16 years old, he was only third African American to attend Henry Ford Trade School. Okay, Henry Ford Trade School. This is they learned the why and the hows, how things operated. They had classroom instruction. They had shop classes. They rotated through that. Students was required to make presentations on what they learned. Other students can ask questions regarding that. And so it was a very thorough school. It was very demanding. You had to come to school and you had to keep your grades up. Otherwise, you was out the door. So they was very, they stress higher learning. And each time you went up, the grades got a little more challenging. It started easy, the curriculum, but each semester it got a little bit more difficult. It didn't get easier, it got more harder. So you had to focus. This is a technical library. In libraries where you can study, it's quiet in there, no cell phones, and they didn't have any cell phones, but that talking was out the door. You could see the librarian back there, and so they had time to study and go over their subject matter material and look at it a little closer. Take the time out and do that to get better marks and to strengthen themselves in certain areas. And so it shows you that the school was really on educating the students. It wasn't just there just to be there. They want these kids to get careers and different for a better life. Now there was a radio club, and you were not required. Students were not required to join the radio club, but that was like music to Claude's ears because he loved radio technology, and this was right up his alley. And so uh, is a large number of boys there, young men, and he realized that some of the languages they were speaking about he didn't understand, and he had to get up to speed. So what did he do? He didn't sulk. He decided to go to Cass Tech. Cass Tech had a night school, and there was a teacher that taught radio code and radio theory. His name was Edward C. Denstead, and he was a pioneer in police radio technology. And this is a young Denstead. This is an older one, and he recognized Claude's ability in picking up things in radio code and theory and how to navigate that system in a very thorough way. And he asked Claude to assist him when he first began developing his ideas. Uh, there was a lot of students there, I'm quite sure. Why Claude? Why choose Claude? Because he recognized his ability. It stood out. You want somebody that has ability and a teacher especially. So Claude helped him in that area, and he's a pioneer in radio technology in Detroit, dealing with law enforcement and capturing criminals two-way, one-way, and two-way radios. So that's huge. And he was able to make a career out of that. It was very uh, worthwhile for him and his family, and so many other people that deals with criminals doing the wrong things, the police, law enforcement. So that's a big plus in in our lives in society. This is now Claude not only wanted to know know about more about radio technology because they was having a test uh, for amateur radio license test, and he was studying for that test, and so he was getting his get more knowledge in that area, so he would be able to pass the test when it would take time to have the test. He was more prepared, and that was once again that was pretty sharp for a young fella, and to go to take the time out and do that. I think he had to pay for the school too. I don't think it was free. And so from Pole Town to where the school was at, that was quite a distance. Quite sure he might have taken one bus. I'm quite sure he didn't walk at night back and forth. So he had to navigate that system. Be mindful. He had no father. Let's be mindful all along this time. Even when he was growing up in Dublin, Georgia, he was a little young. He was very matured for his age. He was a free thinker and he was a go-getter, even though he's very mild-mannered. There's 5 students that took the test when it was time, and guess who's the only one that got got the license with Claude Harvard, and he was basically uh, brought the radio club up to another standard by passing that test. Now the Henry Ford Trade School could receive a radio license within the school, and they can converse with other uh, communication outlets. And so they studying and upgrading their skills. And I know that was a joy for the students there. This is the amateur radio stations of the United States, 1931. You see Woodward Avenue, that's where the school was at, Highland Park, Henry Ford. So they had an amateur radio station in Claude Harvard. It's WAHO. Claude Harvard called it the African Pound. Okay. This is some more radio equipment. And Claude, he not only was operating from the school, he was also operating from home. He created a ham radio uh, set at home. We lived at. And he had moved from 1503 to another location, and I'll show you that location in a minute. Okay, but the family basically moved. Uh, this is another area at the school. We'll get back to that. This is the milling machine shop. This is a milling machine. They had various machines that the students had to learn. There's a student on one of the machines. There's a lot of intricate devices on these machines, and then you got to be safe, use safety. I'm surprised he don't have his goggles on. This is another student, and making tools and making parts, repairing parts. So they're basically learning hands-on and get learning experience, sort of like on-the-job training. And you can learn from a book, which is good, but it's nothing like on-the-job, hands-on training by instructors that will tell you how to do those things. This is where Claude lived at. They moved his family, and they lived on 6105 Whitewood Street. I'm quite sure some of you have heard of Whitewood Avenue in Detroit, and I'm gonna find where that's at. I went to uh, a house where he lived at later on in Highland Park, but this is a house that I believe was not that far from that area. I believe I have to check that out. Whitewood Avenue. I think it's not that far from Highland Park. Uh, this was a Navy uh, aviator. His name was Richard Byrd, and Henry Ford's son, Edsel Ford, he took a liking to this daring aviator, and he was also a polar explorer. And so he created a plane. I think it's called a triophone plane. And they helped finance his journey to the North and South Pole. Admiral Byrd, Richard E. Byrd, uh, and he was setting up meteorology stations for weather in the North and South Pole, and also supply stations where people can go get supplies if they broke down. And so they want to do scientific technology in those areas. And that was very daring at that time to be able to take that on and be successful at it. Uh, I'm not sure if you ever heard of an African American that went to the North Pole. Uh, Name is on the tip of my tongue. He was the first one. He was sled dogs. Uh, he went to the North Pole. Uh, Him and another explorer. He was the first one, though. Matthew Henson, that's his name. Matthew Henson was the first one to go to the North Pole, black or white, and he was very close to the natives there, the Eskimos, or the people. I don't think they call them Eskimos. They were like Eskimos in the area, and he spoke their language, and truly a pioneer that gets left out, like so many of our pioneers uh, that accomplish things that's very significant in history. So he was able to accomplish that through during the early 1900s. Now, Bird, the reason I got Bird up there is for a reason. And while he was at, I believe it was the South Pole, his plane was caught in a storm, a very bad storm, and his radio signal to get back to his station, he wasn't able to get back to his station. So he sent out an SOS, and guess who heard it? Oh, you know who heard it? Claude Harvard. And Claude Harvard was able to uh, get permission to communicate with him because he was an amateur radio license. He had to get communication from the FCC, and they said, "We're looking for him now." So you have him? They said, "Keep talking to him." So there was another ham radio operator in Maine, up in the northern states, and he was able to connect with them as well. And through uh, both of them able to connect and where he was at, they and where the station was at, they knew how to uh, get him back on track. And they told Admiral Byrd that he was needed to turn around and go 180 degrees in the opposite direction, and he would get back to his base safely. And he did, and most likely that might have saved his life. You out there in the cold, you lose your way back. Sooner or later, food's going to run out. You'd be out there in the cold. It's not going to be some good things going on with that. So that was a big accomplishment, and I know he really appreciated that. Bird. Now there was a newspaper. The Ford News carried their own newspaper, and Henry Ford is sitting down with the students in the front, in the middle there. I believe that's Claude Harvard on the left-hand side, and he came to the school to meet Claude Harvard. So here's the great Henry Ford, and he's coming to meet Claude Harvard. I know that was a thrill. And Claude didn't know he was coming, but his instructor told him to, I believe he had maybe had some coveralls on. If he was in the shop, he had to get dressed and go down to the principal's office because that's where Ford was at with the principal, Shirley. And he came through there and shook Henry Ford's hand. And I know that was a great moment. And Ford said, I heard a lot about you. And he said, I heard you was the president. And he said, yes. And Ford was very polite. He didn't brag or nothing like that. And he said, I heard you was voted in 3 times. And he said, that's right. And that's what the instructor said that came along with him. And so that showed that they began to respect him for his technical ability, uh, the students to vote him in 3 consecutive terms. And that was really nice. So he took Claude out to lunch, and uh, he had another agenda for Claude, and that was dealing with his ships. His ships was basically uh, needed to be insured, and he had an old-fashioned megahorn, this old megahorn speaker to communicate, and that was not sufficient for Lords of London. They said he needed to upgrade his technology, and so he knew that Claude Harvard could probably do that, and he wanted Claude to take that on. And he, interestingly, uh, it was a little bit after the graduation. It took 3 years to graduate from Henry Ford School, and after 3 years, you would get a journeyman's license. You get a card, and you would be going into the tool and die area. But guess what? They didn't want any colors in the tool and die area at that time. And so he never received a journeyman's card. So he had to stay in school an extra 2 years, a little longer. But when he met Henry Ford, Ford created a radio department to put radio technology in his boat, to repair it and maintain it. And so in a way that was a blessing because now he had his own shop, he had his own space. And he was able to even improve some things and make a device to improve uh, radio technology while he was there. This is a Henry Ford trade journeyman's card that he received from the Union. He was supposed to receive that back in 1933, but they didn't get one until maybe 40 something years later. By that time, he didn't need it. Uh, and they finally gave him one, and they had a big program for him. Some of the movers and shakers came out in the labor industry, some politicians and friends, they came out for that. This is the boat that there was a lot of boats that they needed repair. A lot of top officials had their own boats, and that was in the Rouge plant, and they had an area where they can bring the boats in and get repaired. So these people were very wealthy, and that was a blessing for Ford. This is the dock, the Rouge plant. That's a huge plant. They left Highland Park, which was a huge plant, basically from Woodward Avenue all the way to Oakland. I went there the other day, uh, and I mean that's a long area from Woodward all the way to Oakland in that area, and that was a huge factory. But out here in Rouge, that even dwarfed that. That was much bigger, and so there was a lot of areas to make the products, and without spending on other people to make the products for you, Ford wanted to do everything himself. He had the money to do it. He had his own little railroad that can take things in and out. Then the ships can come in and drop things off and pick things up. He was a bold thinker, and he had some great people around him to assist him in even making the assembly line. A lot of those people we don't hear about, but without those people, you wouldn't have a moving assembly line. And so he knew how to pull people in to his space and use it to the best of his ability to improve his ideas. They got a check, but they didn't get the acknowledgement as much as he get the invention and so forth. These are some of his lieutenants and that Claude Harvard worked under. And I'll share some more information about them at another time. Charles E. Sorensen, he was head of the motor department, and Peter E. Martin, he was one of the first people that helped build the assembly line. Him and a handful of others. He was before Mr. Sorensen, Charles Sorensen. They was both leading in the motor department and milling department in the Rouge plant, huge Rouge plant. Okay, I'm gonna stop here. Would anybody like to make any comments about Henry Ford and Chicago's World Fair before I go on? Okay, Chicago's World's Fair, 1933, 1934. It was originally 1 year, but since the economy was doing so bad, they wanted to uplift people so they can go there, and they also, guess, want to make money too. But it was when the World's Fair, where they brought out new modern day innovations, different companies, and people came in from around the globe to come to the World's Fair. It was a place to be at. It was at that time there was we didn't have the technology that we have now. It was leading into that modern day technology in the 1930s. And what was going on in the 1930s also was during the Depression, and so they wanted to demonstrate that the future had some brighter things. So, of course, Henry Ford was one of the major entities that wanted to go to the World's Fair. In Chicago, Exposition of Progress, Century of Progress. They had the Ford building, huge building, and they had all the lights, the bells and whistles. They came out and they really did it up. And on opening day, Ford came out with his son Edsel and meet and greet the cheering spectators. And uh, guess who was there? Yes, Claude Harvard. And Mr. Ford, he says to Claude, "Are you going to tell them about your new machines?" And that was all Claude needed to hear, 23 years old. And he personally took charge from that point on. And he began to display about modern testing steps employed an automatic piston pen inspection machine that he had created. He had also created another machine also, exhaust valve seat inspection machine. These were automatic machines, and that's why Claude is known, even though he's not recognized as the father of automation, he is the father of automation of inspection parts uh, for the Ford Motor Company. He did a lot. He had over 30 different inventions uh, in modernizing technology at a very crucial time when other companies was basically gaining on Ford with new models, new improvements. He was kind of stuck on the Model T. He needed to come out of that space, and his son Edsel and some of his workers, his leading people, told him to get involved with another vehicle, and he did the Model A. That's another time. But this was the exhibition for Ford, and Claude was able to Uh, he had outstanding speaking skills, and so soon a word got around that a young black man was displaying inventions for Ford, and all the blacks would come by to take a look at it to see who this young man is. A lot of them didn't even know that the automatic inspection machines were invented by him because they didn't acknowledge him. They mentioned that these were inventions by the Henry Ford uh, company and the school, trade school. That's who the names was on. And Claude had a welcoming manner while explaining intricate mechanism to the youth and adult public audience. It was very educational and refreshing. Every week, a different state would come out to enjoy aspects of the World's Fair. And this week, a Texan people from Texas came out. There was a big uh, white Texan, 6 feet three, over 6 feet 3 inches, over 200 pounds, with a wide Texan brim hat, and he yelled out, "Oh no! Why they have that nigger back there? He's a dummy. I know Henry Ford wouldn't be crazy enough to send a nigger that could talk." But before he could finish the next sentence, Claude displayed his remarkable aptitude presenting machines, engineering complexities, and answering questions modestly. Astonished and embarrassed, they took off as if the exhibition was on fire, because he basically was embarrassed, no doubt. And Claude not only came out for the opening day, but he stayed for the entire I repeat, exhibition. That was I think it was from March to that was in May, all the way to October. And he basically Ford was very smart because he was basically using them as a marketing tool for his innovations for the future with his new cars and innovations. So that was smart on Ford. He knew talent when he seen it, and whether you're black or white or any other ethnic group, he would pull you in to enhance his uh, his dreams as he moved forward to make them a reality. So he recognized that in Claude uh, time and time again, and I'll speak on that another time. And so this is where I kind of close it out. That was something. Here's some more innovations. So Claude knew about being in the school. He knew the intricacies of all these innovations and was able to speak on them very clearly and also answer questions very clearly and precisely. He didn't have no swag and no attitude. He was very polite and he was truly a gentleman. And he also gained more confidence with Henry Ford. And that's going to be speaking about here's the automatic piston pen inspection machine. Had a lot of operational parts. And as you can see, a hooper for loading, cleaning surface, checking surface finish and hardness, checking taper, checking out the roundness, and sorting and separating size. So it was a lot of intricate parts. It wasn't one dimensional. And that shows you Claude's genius. He was multi-dimensional. And at that time, there was no one, let me say that again, no one at Ford that was able to do that. That's why they came out of the motor department. Sorensen and Martin, they came over to this young black man in the radio department. He was in charge of that. You had engineers that had the ability to do certain things, but not on Claude level. And Claude was able to help them during this moment when it was modernizing from the Model T to the Model A and the Model B, which was an 8-cylinder vehicle. So that was very crucial in taking it to the next level and remaining at least head and shoulders with some of the other car companies like General Motors, Chrysler, that were coming along and making some great strides in automation, automotive parts, and features to sell their cars. So the next chapter will be on this is an article on Claude Harvard and his machine. he started getting some recognition. They call him Young Negro Exhibitor, not the inventor for Henry Ford. But Claude was happy to be there. Let's keep that in mind, to be able to share his aptitude in that area and get recognized for that. I know he was in heaven. Okay, so I'm going to end it here. If you have any questions, Mursalata will be making the next presentation in April. Uh, I'll be speaking about another time about Henry Ford at Tuskegee. He went down there, and Claude Harvard was the basically liaison between Henry Ford and Dr. George Washington Carver. Truly another great man. So I'm going to stop here. And I thank you for coming out, listening to the presentation. And I hope to do this on an ongoing basis at schools, other libraries, and museums to share Claude Harvard, Journey of a Genius. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you.
Yeah,
You're
thanks.
welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you all for coming, and thanks for listening. It's really this really interesting lecture. We'll have you get in April, and we'll let you know when that date and time is. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
I guess I did have a comment, though. I guess some modern people don't realize well, what we do probably do realize is how hard it is. Say you're in engineering, of course, you need a bachelor's or a master's to actually get a job doing any of that now. But
Yeah,
like, then you specialize, like you might be a civil engineer, mechanical, get into like fluid mechanics or something like that. And then how hard it is to change from one of those fields to the other. So you have Claude Harvard doing radio, and that was his thing, but then he's going all the piston pins. That's totally different talent. I mean, I give him credit for that, because that's the whole science of it is different. The way you think
yeah,
is different. So yeah, that's really a mark of genius too, to be able to just switch off like that.
yeah. He had
I don't think he was trained in a piston pin either. So he had
I
to
mean,
learn as he went, as he went along.
yeah, it's truly, like you said, it's genius to be able to pull all those. He was basically using modern technology that they were not aware of. Most of those, a lot of those mechanics, they were not. They were basically, maybe a lot of them were self-educated. They became more educated as time wore on. A lot of them were self-educated too, and so their mind wasn't as advanced as Claude Harvard in being able to look read about new technologies, because they wasn't maybe they were not into that new technologies. He was into technology with the radio, and he's conversing with other people around the globe with radio technology and scientific technology, and he's able to bounce things off each other. So his mind was way advanced because he didn't stay in a box. He was always improving and looking for ways to learn more about technology. That's what innovators do. And so he was basically on the cutting edge of all these new innovations. The thing that really amazes me, how he's able to use those innovations to assist Henry Ford, the Ford Motor Company, with those innovations and integrate those innovations into innovations over and over and over again. It's like a person that make a record. Is a hit record, is a blockbuster, and is one and done. But to do that over and over and make another hit record, another hit record, and another hit record, that's genius.
Well, okay. Anybody else have questions? Because really, you just skimmed the surface. That's why we're going to be having two more of them. There's a lot more that he did, And there's also a lot that he didn't get credit for, so you'll have to talk a little bit more about that. You did tell us some stories at the Inventors group that were pretty interesting, and we hope to hear them again.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. What I was hoping that it would be more engaging. I enjoyed when it's more engaging with the audience because I can learn something from them. It's not just me talking. I want them to ask me questions and I can bounce. Those will help me to think about, how I can find out more information so I can answer the questions I need to know. So it's more or less something that I like the engaging part of it. It is just not, I'm learning from them. It's an exchange. It's more like an exchange of information. They may not know about Claude Harvard, but they may know about the city of Detroit. So tell me about Detroit. Tell me about radio technology. Tell me about Dublin, Georgia, down south. Tell me about something, just to sit there uh, and just listen. As an artist, I like to engage, and I like that part. And I enjoyed, even though I had more information, and I think went through it with a little bit more information. I enjoyed your group a little better than this presentation that I did, just because I was engaging with them. I'll
Well,
say that.
do you have any comments? Since you're going to be doing the next one, maybe you could tell us give us a little snapshot of what the second one is going to be about.
No, Mursalata is going to do the next one.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking her to say something.
Hi, I'm here, but I think you might get a lot of feedback from my background, so that's why I stayed mute a bit. But in the second one, I am going to talk about my experience growing up with my grandfather, and it's going to be in his own words. So the audience will get to hear some video clips of him talking about his life, and I'm going to throw out some of the points that David presented here, but from that story perspective, like being there up close, and I think it's going to be really engaging. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this picture you have here on the screen right now and the piston pin inspection machine. But the most important thing I bring is his voice and the stories that I know to fill out the narrative we have started.
Mursalata, this is Tom. Can you or David tell me when Claude Harvard was born? What year?
He was born March 11th, 1911.
1911. Okay. Yeah. I wanted to ask David if there is something that he thinks about that sort of turn of the 20th century mind that was more imaginative. Because when you think, I mean, that was basically the shift from what, the agricultural revolution to the industrial revolution. And it seems like they were all sort of flying by the seat of their pants, but they got in the air and they flew. I mean, they managed it.
Okay, I can't speak about that, but you got to go back before this time period. You got to go back to the Chicago exhibition. They had one in 1893. Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's where it began. Sort of like even before that, the electric age, the dawn of the electric age, really is what ignited innovations in America. But even before then, before electricity, they had mechanical. You had mechanical engineers like George Westinghouse, a remarkable engineer.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
also had Elijah McCoy. And there's other people that we don't know their names. There was an African American named Andrew Beard. And these people were largely self-taught. But there were Elijah McCoy. He did go to school now. There were engineers that went to school as well. And so that's where it became out, like you said, out of the agrarian society, and they started going into more of an industrial society.
Right.
And these industrialists is all about productivity and making money. These money guys are coming in there now, and so they're trying to get the most out of innovation. And so if you got an innovation, then you can make a lot of money. That's it's money in your pocket. A commercial invention. I'm not talking about an invention that you do around the house, but a commercial invention is something that's used by everybody in society, no matter what ethnic group, no matter what age. And from that, the age of innovation, I mean, machines and electricity, the steam engine, the railroads, all that played a part in the industrial age. And that's where each year it began to advance and advance and advance. And you had some great minds beside Thomas Edison. You had some great minds like Elo Thompson. He was an electrical engineer. And you don't hear about him, but he was making more money than Edison Electric Company. And this J.P. Morgan is the one that financed Thomas Edison. People may not know that. He made it into a worldwide empire. Why? Not because he loved Edison, because he wanted to make money. You have these are bankers, capitalists. And so he bankrolled him, he protected him. But this company in Massachusetts, they was making more money than Edison. So he goes up there, he sent people and say, we want to buy your company. They said, we're not selling this company. He said, well, we're going to merge with you. They said, we don't mind merging, but we want to run the company. So they ran the company. And that company, and guess what? Thomas Edison was out. He's no longer running the company. These people are running the company. The new company's name is General Electric. It's still around today. So you had these new innovations that was advancing technology in the North, particularly in all the urban areas. And they need, it was just, a lot of money in that area in elevating society with these new innovations.
Thank you for that. And thank you for the presentation today. I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, I love history.
That
See, what I
shows.
look at history that a lot of times uh, forget they fail to share the story of African Americans a large part time and time again. But if you look at history, a lot of innovators from different ethnic groups they get left out of the picture too. When you start looking at it, uh, the inventor of the TV, they don't really mention who that person is, who those people are. You hear the company's name, but there's a story behind the story. If you look big enough, you can find the thread. And you can find those people. And I love doing that and loving hearing those stories because that's what makes it so compelling because you don't know about it.
Yeah. Well, it shows that you love it, David. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So
Okay,
what's the,
well, okay, oh, go ahead.
so I'm going to let y'all go ahead. I said enough.
No, I guess if there's no more questions, well, thank you so much for coming on here, and thank you everybody for showing up, and I hope you're going to look forward to the next one and join us. Okay?
Please, yeah, truly amazing story, journey about Claude Harvard. Right in Detroit.
Okay, um, bye-bye everybody.
We'll see you in April. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.